Welcome to another broadcast of Restoring Your Life. Well, today I am going to continue, if you watch the other programs, I'm going to continue with making some more craft items. But today I'm going to make something that I think you're going to really enjoy making and wearing. Okay, here it is. It's just a simple apron. But here's the thing. I ran out of material. I didn't have like one piece to make an apron with, so I made a patchwork apron. So I used all kinds of pieces, and we're going to actually make this apron. Now we are going to use a pattern like this. That's all it is. That right here is the fold line, and you just cut one. If you want to make a dual apron, where the back is a different color, like maybe you can use all year round, then you can just do two of them. Do one of the Christmas side and one a regular side, so that you can use the apron all year. So I'm just going to show you how to do the front one, which is the Christmas one. Okay, so if you want a pattern, you can email me at linda@truthfreeze.org, and I will be happy to mail you a copy of this. All it'll cost you is shipping, okay? All right. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is look for some material that we might have hanging around the house. Now, I do have material that is just regular material, and I could probably use that on the back part of the apron if I wanted to do a two-sided, but I'm only going to do a Christmas one, so I'm going to set this aside for now. And I have pieces. See, look at just a piece of this, a piece of this, a piece of this. It's all I have left of all the aprons that I've been making. And so I'm going to use these pieces and make an apron out of it. The first thing you do is you want to get pieces that are kind of long enough, okay? And then you just kind of lay them out how you want them to look. Oh, there's another piece. Well, that'll go like that. And then maybe this piece. It's kind of long, but yeah, it is. I can use a piece of this because there's like a section here. But I need to know how long it is, so I take my pattern and I just set it up there, and I just need just another little piece down here. It has to be double this, though, of course, so you need to make sure that it's wide enough that goes as wide as this is. And let me see if I find another piece that's wide. If not, you can always sew two pieces together to make a wide berthing, you might say. So let's see. I'm running out of pieces, but here's a nice long one. All right. So I kind of just lay it out a little bit. I'm not cutting anything yet. I'm just kind of eyeballing it here, making sure I've got a few pieces in there. Okay, I think that I have what I need. I'm just going to use these 4 pieces. So what I do is I have a couple tools that I use, and they're very handy. This is the most handiest tool you'll have, okay? And it's a rotary cutter. It makes straight lines as I use my trusty quilting square, okay? So I use this, and I use it to make my straight lines. On the bottom, I have a pad. This is a quilter's pad so that you can cut things out using the rotary. Alright, so you don't want to just do it on wood or a table, because you're going to cut into the table and mess up your table. Okay, so what I want to do first is I want to make these strips, okay? So, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to fold it in half just to kind of make it easy on me. And since I'm right-handed, I want to be able to cut this way. I tried doing it this way, it doesn't work. It gets all over the place. And I see that I have just a little piece like that. Okay, so now I'm going to take this piece of my little cutting board, and you can just fold this again, like I'm going to do now, so I only have to cut once, see? And I can just go as far as I can where there is all the material that I need in the middle. Wherever there's like this right here, I'm going to cut this piece out. I'm going to make one strip. Check that out. Look how that is. Straight. That's amazing. Okay, so there's that piece. Now, let's see. I think I want to be a little bit more creative. Maybe I'll put this one in the middle. I'm going to do something a little different See how the top part's a little different than the rest? I want to kind of have it to stand off a little bit. So I'm going to use a very different piece of material to make it stand off a little bit. So let's see what I've got over here in my handy dandy area. Let's see what I've got here. I've got this cute little piece. Now it's not real wide, but it is wide enough to make this little piece right here. I want to make sure that it's not upside down, so I'm going to be putting it right like that. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and cut with my scissors. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this top piece just a little bit so I can make my trim on the top of my bib. Put that over there. Okay, so it's not really big, but it's still wide enough for the top. Okay, so now I lay this down, and I put this one up against it. Let's see, make it I don't want it upside down, so make sure you got your print going the right way. And put it right in the middle, see, so that it's like this. There's this middle, you put it right in the middle. And now I've got my next piece that, it's kind of funky. So I need to cut and trim a little bit off of this. So I'm going to fold it. You know, what you're trying to do is you're just trying to make clean strips. Or a big square. Whatever the material you have to use, you just kind of make clean strips. And so now I'm going to cut with my rotary just to kind of make a couple of nice even strips here. So see how that works? And then I get this out of the way. So now I've got this one that can go right here. I'll tell you what though, the wider the piece of material, the easier. But hey, I'm using scraps, so I'm just going to keep going until I get enough material to make an apron. So now I'm going to fold this one, make sure everything is nice and even. Okay, so now this one I'm going to fold in half because it's got a couple of rough edges. Again, I'm going to square it off. Use this. I like this mat underneath it because it's got squares. So I put it against a line so I can, and then of course the bottom of this square I put it against as the material as well so that I can cut a straight line. So that I know that it is a square piece. In this case it's going to be a strip of material. And then the same thing on this side. I want to make sure that it's got a finished end, that I don't mess up any material edges. Okay. Right, now that's a nice square. I set that there. Now I'm going to add a little bit bigger piece that I have. And I think this will finish it off. How about that? It looks like it's pretty square, but you never know. So you want to still fold it in half and use this and measure it off. Make sure that it's perfectly square. At least on the part where it connects to the material. The bottom I don't really care about right now. Okay, so now I take my pattern just to make sure that I've made it long enough. I sure have. It's plenty long, okay? So now I need to start connecting these together. Now we're at the ironing board and I want to press all these pieces, and I'm going to actually top stitch the pieces as well. So you want to have a nice hot iron. I put it on steam. Turn this over so that the back is up. You can see your seams better. And I like to iron my seams up, but make them all go one direction. Don't split it in half. And do that with all of these pieces. Now this one wants to go both ways, so hey, you know what, I'm just going to go both ways. One goes this way, one goes this way. we're back over at the sewing machine because we're going to do top stitching. Now, if you're doing a festive patchwork, you don't have to keep changing the thread to match the color of the material you're sewing through. I just have some green thread on there, top and bottom. Even though I have blue here, it's got green in it, so it's going to all match perfectly fine. You don't even see the top stitching when you're done. And it does add a little bit of a you know, contrast to it. So you want to just sew on the top stitch where the seam is the direction of the seam. You want to sew on top of the seam because it flattens it out too. It makes it a really nice piece of material. So now just top stitch it, regular size stitching. You can actually use zigzag stitching if you want to make it more decorative. Now let's go back over the table and cut out the pattern. So what I'm going to do first is fold this in half because my pattern is a half pattern. So I want to make sure that I fold it in half, lining up my lines so that I don't have a crooked pattern design. Okay? And then we simply lay this down. This is the fold line, and then you just pin it in place. I only need to put a couple of pins in it. I've been cutting around these, like I said, I made 25 of these, so I'm getting pretty good at it. Alright, so then you just simply cut the pattern out. Use scissors, don't use your rotary. Okay. Alright, take my pins out, sit over there and take a look at that. Now we've cut out this pattern. Now what we need to do is we want to make a pocket. So I found some other material and I did it for time's sake. I went ahead and cut the piece out. Okay, so then I got this square and it pretty much fits on here. I like a big pocket. You don't need to make it perfectly square right now. We're going to do that when we put it together with the backing and the facing, because you want to put that all together first before you cut it out. So let's put that there. That's kind of what I want. So I've got the square. I cut out a lining. You can use a white, whatever color you have that's cotton, a cloth, and you just want to make sure that it meets the edges. So I cut it out. I mean, it goes way over here too, but it doesn't matter, because I'm going to cut that out in a minute. But then I also have interfacing, fusible interfacing. And so we're going to go over to the ironing board and we're going to iron it to the wrong side of the colorful part. Don't do the wrong side of the lining. Put it on the colorful part. Okay, so we're going to go over to the ironing board and iron it. Okay, so I've got the fusing, interfacing face down. You don't want to iron with it up because it'll stick to your iron and you'll ruin your iron. Okay, so you want to make sure you've got the interfacing there and then just press it. Okay, you press it to the wrong side of the pocket. And now we take this, turn it over, put the lining and the front of the pocket together. Make sure it's nice and ironed. And we're going to pin it in place. Now I do like to pin the pocket because we're going to do a little bit of squaring off the pocket so we have a nice square. I mean, you can make a decorative size. You can make a triangle. You can make a heart pocket. You can get all creative, but I like squares. So I'm pinning this together. And then I'm going to take this square and I'm going to square it off. I'm going to use a pin, and it doesn't matter what color it is. You won't be able to see it because you're going to sew through it, and you're actually drawing on the lining anyway. And I'm going to square it off. So I'm going to make sure that my material, both materials, are going to be sewn through. So I make a square. So what I do is I just kind of do one side first. I do the top and the right, and then I move it up and then line it up in here, so I make the square perfectly lined up with what is inside of here and down to the right. And then I make sure, whoops, see, I'm losing material there, so I got to move it up. Make sure that's going to sew through all those pieces. So then I just make my square very lightly. Okay, see, now I have a perfect square to sew. Because you try to sew a square without lines, you're going to make a mess. So now let's go over to the sewing machine. Okay, and so it really doesn't matter where you start your sewing, but you need to leave a gap. And I like to leave the gap at the bottom. And I like to leave the top completely nicely sewn. So I'm going to start on the bottom of my picture. Make sure my picture is this way, so I'm going to start on the bottom. And on the line, you start sewing. But I'm going to leave a gap. So I'm going to start sewing about right here. And I'm going to do a back tack so that when I turn it, the stitches don't come out. And I have a really cool sewing machine that when I stop sewing, it leaves the needle inside. So I can turn it and move on. And now I've made my square. Now let's go finish it off. Okay, so now we're going to finish off this piece by taking the needles out and trimming with our scissors. You want to cut the corner edges straight across so that when you turn it inside out, you can make real sharp, pointy edges, see? And then I've got too much material going here, so I'm going to cut this off. Be careful not to cut into your stuff, because it can happen. And then on this side too. Okay, and then all I do is turn it inside out. You can make two pockets. You can put a pocket on the bib part, or you can also just leave it on the bottom. For these aprons, I only made the one pocket. And so then I just poke the corners out with my finger, and I make nice sharp corners. Okay, and then there's that one. And then I just kind of do this, lay it down, make sure that that part is tucked in. See right here? Make sure this part is tucked in. I don't have to stitch it or anything, you just tuck it in and we're going to iron it down. Pull off any strings that are in the way. Make sure your corners are cornery. Now this one's kind of not cornery, so I take a pair of scissors and just poke it in there to make a nice sharp corner. Okay, and then I iron it. Nice square pocket. Make sure you tuck in the underlining too. You don't want the lining to show through. I've done it where it does show through, but you can't really see it. Okay, so that's all ironed down. Now I want to top stitch it. I want to make a nice top stitch here. Again, we're going to do a top stitch. Make sure it's the top of your material. You don't have to go backwards on it. You can just do a top stitch right across it. Make it about a 1/4 inch in, and then up we go. Okay, we take our apron. This is when it gets really fun. We start putting it together. And then this pocket goes right about here. I like to leave it about, I don't know, 3 inches from the bottom. Make sure that it's I eyeball it. If you want to measure it out, you can. I just eyeball it. And then you pin it down. Make sure when you pin it down, you give yourself enough time, area to sew. You don't want to put your needle all the way to the edge if you're a new sewer. So now it's got a really nice pocket right there. Alright, so here's this apron that we just add the pocket to. The next thing we're going to do is make bias tape. Yep, we're going to make bias tape because it's like $1.98 to $2.35 for 3 feet or 3 yards. We need about 4 yards to finish this off of bias tape. You can buy it if you want, but we can make it, and it's so fun. It's my favorite part. But what you do need is a little tool. It is a bias maker. This is a bias maker. It is the most ingenious thing I ever saw in my life, and it's hilariously fun. What you do is you make strips of 1 inch thick material strips. So let's get to work. Okay, we'll move this aside because we don't want to cut into our apron. Now we need to find material where we can make our bias. Let's see what material I have here that's long. This is fairly long. And you can mix and match your bias too. You don't have to do one single color. You can just make a bunch of different colors. Here's a nice red piece. I think I'm going to use this for my bias. So I just fold it in half. I'll be able to use this piece and it'll probably make all my bias for this apron. And again, I have a lined area here, so I line my line up against the material. Take my trusty ruler, my trusty rotary cutter, and I line it up. I line the edge up to the bottom so it's nice and straight. Off to the sewing machine. So now you put the right side to the right side. Okay, you put these two together like this, and you sew diagonally from left to right to the bottom. Left top to right bottom. Sometimes you get it backwards, you're going to find out that you did it backwards, and then you have to cut it and do it again. So make sure you go from top diagonal, and maybe you want to pin this too. This one gets a little tricky if you can't hold it very good. And you go from corner, and make sure you do back tacking because it does need to have it strengthened, and then back to the corner. This is where I need to trim off that corner that I just did. Make sure I cut off all my strings. See, that makes a nice straight bias. You'll notice when you buy the bias, you'll see that seam that's sideways. It doesn't go together like edge to edge. And you just keep doing it until you make your strip. Okay, now I'm going over to make sure it looks like I have enough. Yeah, I do. I'm going to go over to the ironing board and iron this out. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're just going to iron out the seams. So you open it up and you iron this direction. You make sure the seam goes that direction. And if it's a thick seam, you didn't really cut it that good, you can tell from here. So I'm just going to cut it so it's nice, a nice thin seam. Go to the next section. You don't have to iron the whole thing yet. Now we're ready to make our seam binding. So cool. Go to I think these are like $6. You might even get them online for cheaper. This is a number 12, and it's for 1 inch seam binding. I think they have them wider, but this one's about the best. I really like the way this works. So to get it ready, you cut a little triangle, a little pointy edge like an arrow, like that. And then you take this and you poke it inside, right side down. Put it underneath inside of here. It has a little slit on top. See that little slit? And then I use a needle to feed it through so that it comes all the way out on the other end. See? Comes out on the other end. And I use the same needle and I go all the way to the end of my ironing board. And then the fun part, this is the fun part. You iron it. You make this, you just roll it and iron it. I mean, you can even, hold this and just kind of do this. You just iron it through here. Hold this, you can pull this. It has a little flip, you can pull this too. But make sure you iron it closest to the tip of this thing. Because if you go out too far, the seam binding will open and it won't make a seam, a nice seam. So you go slow all the way and then move it up. And then I repin it at the top of my ironing board. Because otherwise, if I try to pull, it doesn't, it just moves. So I pinned it to the top here again and I iron right down like that. And I pull this along. Whoopsie, see my pin came out. So it snags up. Make sure you pin it in there good. And then I'm getting across that thick piece. So now I go slow and I keep going. Slow. Okay, so then you just keep going. And all the way to the end. Take a look at that. Make sure you get your pin out. Okay, now we're back at the sewing machine and we're finishing it off. We've got this bias and we start at one end. And what you want to do first, you don't need to cut the bias yet, we will do that in a minute, is you start from the bottom. See how you have the corner here? It has a sharp, like a point. That's where you start. Because you just want to bias tape all the way around this and stop there. And then we're going to cut it. So what you do, this is the fun part, you put the material within the bias tape. The first stitching is a little hard because you got to try to get it in there. And then you fold it over. So, you know, so that's how it works. And you fold it over. Put it on there. Make sure your machine is on zigzag. I like to make my zigzag just a little bit fatter. I don't like it to be close, so I make a nice open zigzag because you just need to have it tacked down. And you just slowly make sure that the edge is within the center of the seam binding. Because as you'll see, it comes together like this. And now you want to put the material up to the middle so that when you fold this over, it makes a nice trim like that. So you start there, fold it over, make sure it's on zigzag, and then do a little back tack and down you go. And you go all the way, you go slowly, you can just hold it together.
Come on, it's lovely when we're staying right together with you.
Measure out that I need to just cut the bias. Don't cut your apron, but cut the bias and then finish it off. Okay, you don't need a back tack on this because we're going to sew over it. Now what you've done is you trimmed the bottom part of the apron. Now what we need to do is we need to trim off the top. I'm going to iron this down like that. And I'm going to make a seam. I'm going to turn it under and sew it across. So you fold it over and iron it down because we're gonna, it's like a facing, and then I'm going to fold it in again and iron it hemline. Alright, now again you can pin this, make sure you can also pin this down, but again I've been sewing for a long time, so, and it's already ironed, so it's pretty much set down by itself. So then I'm going to put on a straight stitch and go across. Again, you can use zigzag if you'd like to make it decorative. Now we're ready to finish it off. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this strip, you're going to fold it in half, make sure that it's at the edge, and we're not going to make a tie neck, we're just going to make a loop on the top. Very simple. So I measure it. So I put it around my neck and I kind of, okay, so I'll use this apron as an example. And I take a couple of pins and I just kind of, okay, I'll put that bib, that'll go there, and then this side will go here. I just kind of pin it just to mark the neck part. That's what I do there. Okay, so now we're going to put this together. The longer this is, the longer the tie will be in the back. Now what you do is you take the pie. We're almost done. You start with the left side of the apron. We'll take that part where we pinned around our neck. We've got the 2 pin marks here. Okay? And so we take the one on the left and you hold on to it. You line it up with the top where the neck is and you pin it so that you don't have to be exact. Just stick it right there. Pin it. And then you take this piece, I get my thread off there, and you take this trim and you kind of just eyeball it, hold it, go all the way to here, kind of just like that, and then you pin it here. So now we've got this piece. This is going to be my tie. Okay, now you start at the end of your tie. You open the end up, fold it in, and you can iron it down if you want to make it easier, and then you just kind of fold it in and start sewing your bias together, right sides together, like that. Okay, and we stick it under here, and then just make sure you put it back on zigzag, your back tack, and you just start sewing. And there's this place where the seam is right here. It's a little thick and bulky. Be real careful that you make sure you get all of the material folded over inside. You don't want any of that seam stuff to come on through. And then sew the bias together all the way up to that spot where we pinned it to the apron. And you kind of just go slowly, keeping both edges together. Make sure that this is in the middle and you've got the fold lines connecting on the edge. All the way. Sometimes it's thick, sometimes it's thin. It's okay. Just keep going. Because it depends on how thick you made your strips. Okay. Now we're kind of coming to that seam again. Make sure I get over all the thicknesses through it. We're getting close here. Here's the edge. Alright, here we are. My apron is inside. I'll take the pin out so I get that out of the way. I just kind of hold it to the area that it's going to be sewn in. Make sure that the corner is inside the bias. Fold this over, hold it down, and sew it right on through the material onto the bias. Okay. Make sure the back is still folded in front, and you just keep on sewing all the way to the neck. This is the most inexpensive gift I've ever made because I'm making it out of scraps, and you can use anything. You can take apart a dress and make an apron, you know? I mean, there's so many creative areas you can do it. You can be creative with your material. Okay, so now I'm getting closer. Now I can take the pin out because it's in my way, and I'm really close to it being connected at where I had pinned it. So I keep going, fold it in, go all the way to the edge of the apron. I like to back tack at my material connections because then it strengthens that area. And you keep going. Now I've got that other pin, remember? Now I'm on the neck part. I'm on the loop that goes around your head. And so I keep going. There's no material in it. I'm just sewing the bias together because I'm making the loop. Here's that needle right here. So I'm getting close. And we sew. It's interesting because this is on the trim of a seam. Let me make that a little smaller. And so I don't have to keep the pin in because I can see that I need to put the next piece of the bib right there. Okay? Make sure the back is turned in. Hold that in there. Put put that in there. So this, fold this over. What happened to this? This is like, okay, then you put it in here and you fold this over and you sew it to the bit. Again, I like to double back tack it. And keep going all the way to that other place where you sewed on that other bias. Now, if I was doing a reversible one, I would have put the back on it first and then basted the two pieces together, then put this on it so that it is reversible. Okay, so I've got this little tail here. I want to cut that off because I need to tuck it into the bias. I don't want any extra material in there. So then I do it all the way to the corner. Make sure you get your material in there though. You don't want to not catch your material. And this is a thin bias. You can buy thicker bias, makes it easier to sew, and then you don't have such a thin bias to work on. Or you can get a thicker bias maker, maybe 1.5 inch one. But this one works for me. Okay, now I'm doing the tie, finishing it off. Sew through all the thicknesses, make sure everything's tucked in. This is the patchwork apron made with scraps of material. Now I've got close to the end. I don't want to do it all the way to the end yet. I want to fold this in to trim it off. Fold it in, and you want to loop over the bias over on the left and tuck that in and put the bias on the right. I know you can't see me doing this. And then you make sure it's a nice clean finish like that. And then sew it together. Back tack it. And there you go. Okay, this is done. Let's cut off that other thread. Now take a look at this finished product. Isn't that cute? Made with love. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time.